I'm all right if no one sits up front because I'm also a pastor and I'm used to that. So it's good that there's at least one person up here.
I'll be here.
Good afternoon. So I do all those things that he just said, but I don't even necessarily consider myself an educator as much as I do a formator. But I am a preacher, and so I think context is important. Because I would say what I do in the context of what he just spoke about, of teaching 11th graders, is not normal at all. I could say that from the very beginning. The context of it is not normal. I'm part of the program called Youth Theological Studies at St. Mary's Seminary and University. It was originally part of the Lilly Foundation. That's how it was originally founded, when they were doing different youth activity, different youth programs across the country. So it's been around about 18 years. I've taught it for about 10 years, for the past 10 years. And so that is the context. They come from all over. They're not just Catholic. I've had Muslims, there's Jews, there's agnostics, there are atheists. And they all converge in this one place in Baltimore, one day a week in the fall. They get college credit for the experience, for going through the process. So it is not a normal setting per se. They are unique in that sense that they have an interest in theology. Most of them do not pursue theology. They simply like asking the questions about it and to be able to look at it in a very different way from what they have become accustomed to. And they've taught me a great deal about maybe where we go wrong as well in our Catholic schools. Catholic schools are very big in the Baltimore area, Catholic schools. So that is the context in which I'm about to tell you what I do. And what I have found works in that process of trying to lead people, young people in particular, to be able to grasp some of not only the theological concepts. So the name of the class is Dialoguing with Faith and Culture. To be able to take cultural experiences and not just have me critique them or you critique them, but to allow them to critique the culture. In many ways, my generation, whatever I am, Generation X, I guess, we created a lot of the problems. We have enabled a lot of the problems. They have a very different perspective, I've learned over the course of time. But to be able to engage them in that way to try to find some resolution to some of the issues that we have. But I do believe, and it's not just because I'm a priest, I'm in a privileged position. When I meet with them, they are willing to tell me things I don't always want to hear, but they do tell me about their experience. But it always begins with prayer. That is central to who we are. It is central to who I am as a priest. It's the thing that keeps me going as a priest. So I want to lead you through that process. It will seem rather childlike. But you know, I've had a lot of people talk to me the past 3 days, just as you have, and not always a lot of quiet. So I'm going to invite you into this experience for 2 minutes of quiet. If you have stuff on your lap, put it on the floor. It only gets in the way. It obstructs. And I should tell you, I don't like technology. I put a PowerPoint together. I may remember to use it. Even in class, I use 2 videos. I use a video based on this prayer experience we're about to do, and then one on eschatology. That's the only 2 times I use technology in class. So I invite you to close your, you could put your hands on your lap in the open position. You can close your eyes. I won't go through your bags. I won't go through anything. Take a few deep breaths. And I guess to begin, can you, reflecting on the past 3 days, is there one image that stands out to you? One image through what we've heard, what we've talked about. And allow that to just rest in your heart. invite you to view it in the context of these two passages, two verses, one from Genesis, one from Jeremiah, as to what it is God is trying to form within you. Then the Lord God formed the man out of the dust of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Then the Lord God formed the man out of the dust of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. The first one. Second one. I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, working at the wheel. I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, working at the wheel, forming and molding and what is it that God is trying to form within you? You can open your eyes. I do believe it's important to begin with prayer, not simply words, but silence. We've talked about that the past couple of days. But I also, I start every year with something very basic, and that's simply clay. It's a ball of clay. And that image comes up in Scripture over and over again. We hear it in Genesis. We hear the potter who is forming it. We hear the earthen vessel. Paul uses that language, so it's used quite often. And I'll explain the pictures up on the screen. I not only do this in class, I've done this activity with other ones, and if we had time, I would do it with all of you. And mostly to begin to question, what is the process like? What does this feel like in using something so tactile, something so simple, something so basic and childlike in many ways, which is where God often encounters us, using this clay. But I put the one picture of this young man up here. I went on one of the Catholic high schools in Baltimore asked me if I would come and work a retreat with them. They were doing a self-care retreat for the peer ministers of the school. So it was all guys. It was 30 young men, 10th grade to 12th grade. And they said, well, you do the night prayer. I said, all right, I'll do night prayer, but I'm going to do this activity with them. And so they were all given this clay. Now there's simple instructions that I give them with this clay. And there's a reason for it. I'm intentional about everything that I do when I do this process, when I try to lead them into this experience. But the main rule is you have to keep your eyes closed through the whole experience. You can't keep your eyes open. That way it is not you that's trying to mold something. It is something within you that is trying to form this clay into something. It might not be what you want. It might not be how it looks, how you think it should look. All you can do is allow the interior, the divine within you, to help you form something. They don't know that. They don't know that language. I just kind of use that experience. But I used this young boy up on the screen here, and I did ask their permission to use his photo. I had never done it with all boys. I had no idea what it was going to be like. I had no idea what the experience was going to be. But I simply asked them, well, what is it like? What was the process like? What was it like keeping your eyes closed? And this young man spoke. He wasn't the first one. They kind of worked their way around. And he said, he simply had a ball. It never really formed into anything beyond this little ball of clay. But he had said, as I was forming it, as I was feeling this clay and feeling it in my hands and molding it and feeling it so close to myself, he said, I said, well, what did you think when you opened your eyes? He said, I wish I could see the world like I saw when my eyes were closed. And when I do it in class, when I do it with them, the experience always is, I want to control it, I want to define it, I want to tell it what it is, I'm worried about what everyone else is going to think, about what their clay is, so I'm alert as to how everyone else is looking at mine. Again, working with 11th graders predominantly, that's where they are. There is the question of identity. And so all these things begin to come about. They have no idea why it is that we're even doing it in the first place. Funny that when I do it in class, and that's always their response as well. They want to control it. They wish they had their eyes open. They want to see what they're doing. But one person at the end of it just smashed it. That it was just one more thing we had to do in order to move on to the next thing. And by the end of the class, and what I have them do is I have that clay sit on that desk for the whole 16 weeks that they come in. Because it begins to create a space. And we have talked about it the past couple of days as well. Can we create this space? Can we create this tension of taking something that might be unknown, something that we might not necessarily be able to see with our eyes, and to begin to dialogue with it in a different way? Mindful that the name of the class is Dialoguing with Faith and Culture. That if I can't see it and I don't know it, it's very hard to have a dialogue with it. Otherwise, what I would get is when I would ask them, what is God? What is their image of God? All they would say is the basic things that they've been taught over the course of their lives, based on authority figures or parents. It's the guy on the clouds with the beard. Jesus died on the cross for my sins. Well, all right, well, what does that mean? So you kind of get those images from them that I at least am aware that they have been taught something about their faith, but they have been given the opportunity a lot of times to go to that deeper place within themselves, to begin to learn to dialogue not only with faith, dialogue with culture, dialogue with this God, but also to learn to dialogue with themselves. That is probably the most unknown for them is what is this interior life? What is this reality that I live with in my life? So over the course of those 10 years, this is kind of the premise of what I work with when I use this clay. Before I get to anything theological, I do believe I use this quote quite often from Karl Rahner. In the days ahead, you will either be a mystic, one who has experienced God for real, or nothing at all. I believe he said it in the 60s, great theologian from Vatican II. But I have a couple that, which as I said, I'm not good with this. I forgot to put on the other one. The other one is Einstein, who says that you can't fix the problems of the current day by the same consciousness that caused the problems in the first place. That you have to be able to dialogue in this way. And so for what I have learned is, can we kind of flip the whole process on its head and kind of build the theology around the experience of the divine, of something within themselves? And how does that begin to play out? So I usually begin with this. Pope Francis, I believe this was from the first interview that he did after he had become Pope. He made the statement that if one has the answers to all the questions, that is the proof that God is not with him. It means that he is a false prophet using religion for himself. The great leaders, the people of God like Moses, have always left room for doubt. You must leave room for the Lord, not for our certainties. We must be humble. And he went on to say, I have a dogmatic certainty. God is in every person's life. God is in everyone's life. Even if the life of a person has been a disaster, destroyed by vices, so on and so forth. And we saw it in the video this morning. Because even in listening to different speakers the past few days, there are many challenges. But can we use the challenge as an opportunity as the entry point for this experience of God, this experience of more of a mystical union, of coming in contact with their heart? The video that we watched this morning of the young man spoke about doubt. and I think I use the quote for that very reason, because it is so easy to put an element of doubt in someone's life when these young people are gathered together in this classroom, the 12, 15 of them that come. But they have been taught that doubt is a bad thing, and that they're not supposed to doubt, and they're not supposed to question, and they're supposed to be certain about all these things. And allowing them the opportunity to doubt and question, which we ourselves have to be willing to do ourselves, as a young man had mentioned on the video. None of us can be certain about everything. But can we use that as the entry point to begin to say, maybe there's something more. Maybe there's something more to who I am. Maybe there's something more to who this God is. Again, I am not a techie person, so I just stole this image from PowerPoint. I think what we have done over the course of and myself included, is we try to feed people from the top. So we try to define God through our religious ed, through religion class, however it may be, parents, authority, community. All of that has been thrown into all of us over the course of our lives. And it comes out in one way. It comes out in somewhat of a robotic way. And so what I do with them is, can we begin to break all of it down? Before you even get to the theology, can we start to look at where these doubts, where these elements of uncertainty exist in their life? Like, can you begin to imagine that at this very moment, you are living and dying at the same time? Now, we don't think that way. We don't think about it that way. But when we raise it to that conscious level, we can begin to look at things from in a very nuanced way. And so all I do is, for the first few weeks of teaching these young people, is to keep raising the element of doubt, and yet at the same time kind of be the constant with them. They can keep throwing it at me, because I am somewhat sure, obviously I'm a Catholic priest, so I have some idea of teaching. But can we begin to throw ourselves into this center, into this place of tension, into this, what could be either creative or destructive tension in our lives, where we begin to discern where this experience of ongoing conversion happens, but also dialogue and choice. But we often do it in the context of current events. Now, whether it's good or bad, I never have to come up with something, because something always happens that you can kind of throw into the mix. So this fall, it was the shooting in Las Vegas. Can you take an event like that? Of course, in society, if we do it the old way, it's whether it's about guns or not guns. And we never quite get beyond that, because we keep trying to deal with it on a political level, political meaning surface level, rather than to go to the deeper issue of the person. So what I invite them to do, which is not easy for any of us to do, the one thing that struck me about that event was the guy did it from the 32nd floor. That he had become, and I was listening to an FBI officer, former FBI guy, who was talking about how that is very symbolic of the sense of how separated he had become from his own humanity. That how far separated he had become from, and it's all about power in that moment, but how powerless he was, just as powerless as the people on the ground in some sense, because it was an illusion of power. Can we put ourselves not just with the people on the ground, but can we also put ourselves in between where those bullets are flying, where we can begin to analyze the experience of the person on the ground as well as the person on the 32nd floor from a human perspective, from a perspective of knowing that throughout John's gospel, Jesus is coming into a hostile world. It's one hostile event after another. That's where the experience of God is. That's where they're going to experience the divine. That's where this breaking in begins to take place. And so not about guns or not guns, that gets us absolutely nowhere. But can we put ourselves in the middle of it and begin to look at the nuances of life and death? Can we begin to look at the nuances of these realities, light and darkness, which sometimes we think is light, which can really be darkness, and learn the skills, learn the abilities to be able to discern some of these realities in which we live in, so that it comes from a deeper place. It comes from somewhere deep within ourselves, rather than simply our heads. That's the way we've always done it. That's the model most of us have grown up on. I grew up on, and I've had to learn it myself. Working with young people, have pushed me to that place, that I got to go to this deeper place to understand what this is really about and what it is that we are being called to. And I realize I'm about out of time, correct? That, he said that's about right. All right, so I'm going to flash forward. And I'll just say one other thing. So this is where I'm saying, can we go from dealing with contemporary issues, cultural issues, whether it is these violent issues or technology or other realities, to stop trying to deal with them on the surface, but do it from the inside out, to go to this place within ourselves where we have to wrestle with it, where we have to learn to dialogue with it, where we have to learn to deal with attention. We talked about anxiety. We heard about anxiety. That's where conversion takes place. That's where this change takes place if we allow ourselves to sit in that place. It's uncomfortable. That's what we don't like. But that's where it happens. That's where the divine is trying to break into our lives. So I'll stop there.